Hello everyone. We're continuing on with our N4 slash pre-intermediate lessons. And last week we had a bit of we talked about one of the pairs of terms that is very confusing to a lot of people when they first see them. We talked about koto ni naru and koto ni suru. And as you can probably see from the screen in front of you, we're continuing on with our suru naru comparison, but with slightly different expressions. So it's worthwhile stepping back and looking at what we did last week for just a sec and talking about the difference between suru and naru. And does anyone remember what we mentioned? What's the difference, or rather, what's the relationship between suru and naru? They're a pair of verbs. They have a technical relationship between the two of them. Does anyone remember what they are, or what it is, rather? They're a transitive pair. Exactly. And a transitive pair, just in case you're not familiar with the term, is that it's two verbs. One is transitive, the other is intransitive. Transitive verbs take they take a direct object. So I eat curry. Curry is the direct object. Or I open the door. Whereas naru, which is intransitive, does not take one of those. You say the door opens. And you can hear that in the sense of you say I open the door, I, the subject, is doing the action. Whereas with the intransitive pair, the door is open, or the door opened. The door isn't doing the action itself. And that translates into what we did last week and this week as well, in a sense, in that when you see uh, constructs using suru, it's referring to the speaker, well, usually the speaker, but not always, but the subject doing the action. The subject is making the thing happen, whatever it is that's happening, making the decision, doing the action, making the change, whatever it is. Suru is showing that. Naru, however, is like with last week's expression, koto ni naru, it was showing an action that was decided by someone else. So if just a quick review, if I am working for someone else, as I did for many years, and the boss tells me, tomorrow I want you to take off. Maybe the kids are sick, so there's no class tomorrow, so please don't come in. And that's not my decision. So if I said I'm to take tomorrow off, I'd say yasumu koto ni naru. Or if I'm talking about the decision happening yesterday, I might say yasumu koto ni natta. Why? Because I didn't choose to take the day off. Someone else chose it for me. However, if I did make the decision, maybe I have some paid time off stored up. I'm like, I think I'm going to take tomorrow off. I need a long weekend. Then I could say yasumu koto ni suru. And by using suru, I, the speaker, or rather the subject, is making the decision. They're the ones doing the action. So hold on to that today, and you will see not always a perfect link like that, but if you can kind of hold on to that as the loose theme of today's expressions, you'll see a similar relationship between the nisuru and ninaru expressions that we have today. And so with that, let's jump into it. We are going to be talking about yoninaru and yonisuru, surprise, surprise. And then nakunaru, which is kind of the inverse of the first one that we have. So that one kind of stands on its own. It's kind of a reverse, but we're going to talk about these two things. Now, with both of these, we are talking more about, it says here at the bottom, how things come about. So we are often here talking about a change from one state to another state. And I just realized my window is open and there's noise outside. So give me a second so I can close that. Sorry about that. We're finally in the season, well, part of the season in Japan where it's not blistering hot. And so we can actually open the window and not use the AC. It's great. So, like I said, we are talking often here about changes taking place, a change or a transition between something happening and something no longer happening, or something no longer not happening and then starting to happen. This is focusing on that change that's taking place. And as you might have guessed, based on what we talked about for a few minutes, the naru is going to talk about something that happens naturally, which, natural things are out of our control. If we say it got cold, we are talking about the weather getting cold, not some decision that, we made. Whereas suru, again, is going to focus the action or the volition, the will to do something or to make a choice on the speaker or the subject's part. And the last one is, an inverse of the yoninaru, and we'll see that, later today. So let's jump into it. Now, there's actually two versions that you see with yoninaru. And of these two, I would say the second is far more common. I don't have data to back this up. This is just my feeling of personal data points of hearing Japanese for however many years I've been learning it. Too long. I tend to hear the potential verbs being used much more often than just your straight up verbs. Now we're going to have examples of both, but I tend to see potential verbs. Now remember, potential verb is, those are the ken verbs, So if taberu is a verb, then tabereru, I can eat, or I'm able to eat. That is your potential verb. And this is, I'm going to give you another example, one that you will hopefully be able to use either now or in the future when you talk about yourself. Hanasu, to speak, is your standard verb, and to be able to speak would be hanaseru. That would be your potential verb. Now, as I noted, we're talking about changes, and often it's changes over time. Now, if we talk about, speaking or eating, that's still an action. And we could say, I eat sushi or whatever happens to be. However, what's going on here is we're talking about, the emphasis is on, if we have a timeline, and we have this A point and a B point. Look at my beautiful timeline with no line at all. If we have A and B is, say, eating the sushi. We're not talking about, the goal of a sentence isn't to say I eat sushi. We're talking about the fact that back in the old days, back in A time, I didn't eat sushi, and now I do. And it's that transition between not doing something and doing something, or, as we'll see later on, the reverse. The change from no to yes, or from yes to no, or doing to not doing, something along those lines. Now, of course, the best way to see this is with some examples. So let's take a look at our little chunks that we usually focus on, and then we'll take those chunks and we'll throw them into entire sentences. So the first one, motsu yo ni naru. Now, yo does have kanji, but 99.9% of the time you're going to see it in this hiragana form. So motsu yo ni naru means to come to hold, which, again, you think, well, do I use that? Is that something that would come up? And don't forget that motsu, we're translating it as hold here, but motsu can also mean to have. Not to have in the sense of you possess it, but have it as in, oh, do you have a pen? Yes. Someone's not asking about the existence of a pen. They're like, are you carrying a pen on you? But we don't usually say, are you holding a pen in your bag, or are you carrying a pen? You just say, hey, do you have a pen? And motsu has that meaning as well. So motsu, our standard verb, would be motsu yo ni naru, or to, come to hold something. Come to in the sense that before you weren't holding it and now you are. Oyogeru, there's our potential verb, to be able to swim or can swim. Oyogeru yo ni naru means to come to be able to swim. Naru is showing that change. We've always seen naru in the sense of change. And so naru is showing that ni naru, this is the change happening. If being able to swim is the change that's taking place, then what was before? Well, probably not being able to swim. This is something I will hopefully be able to say about my children sooner than later. One of my kids can swim. The other one has a deathly fear of not breathing, but holding his breath underwater. So that's It's something that one day I hope I could say. That's I know I will. That thing about that second sentence about him. So let's look at some examples using those two chunks that we just had. And now I'll give you a few more. First one, let me get it highlighted in green for you. あのテレビ番組を見てから料理に興味を持つようになった。So, the first half of the sentence has nothing to do with this expression per se. We're just talking about, we're setting the stage. Like, why did this change take place? Because you watched some show on TV. And if you ever live in Japan or visit Japan and you take the time to watch Japanese TV, I'd say between 90 and 120% of Japanese TV is about food and about cooking. Probably closer to 120%. As in, there's so much cooking shown on the TV that it just sucks out my desire to be even close to the topic of cooking anywhere else in my life. That's how much cooking there is. And food. So, the second half, let's look at that. 料理に興味を持つようになった。So, I came to have an interest, or I came to be interested in cooking. Now, this one in particular, 興味を持つ, to have an interest or to be interested, it's not really one you use with potential form to begin with. Like, you don't really think about the ability to become interested. I could see some very strange sentences that might use it, but we're talking about just a change. Now, before we jump to the second sentence, let's think about motsu. And can you think about, now we're talking about change, let's think about something that people have, or I'm going to hint and say people carry now, but they didn't, say, 10, 15 years ago. Can anyone think of something? It shouldn't be too hard. This isn't a hard question. What's something that people carry all the time now, but they didn't in the past? There's a good chance you're holding it now. Yeah. That's, if anyone's wondering, that's the hiragana form of the the katakana word that's been shortened for smartphone. Usually you see it written like that, but pronunciation is the same. Small. So yeah, phones. Almost everyone carries phones. We're not talking about potential, about the ability to carry a phone. We're saying there's a change where some of you might be too young for this, but at some point in the past, a long time ago, we didn't carry phones all the time. So I might, and I'm just kind of spinning this sentence up off the top of my head. Let's see, let me type that real fast. Now, this sentence actually isn't the most natural. I'm using it as a stepping stone. But take a look at this. 人はどこでもスマホを持つようになった。So people, now again, let's take this as an intermediary sentence. People have come to have their phones everywhere and anywhere. Now, we're already talking about change, but there's actually one more thing that we can add to the sentence to really emphasize that change taking place. And can anyone think of, before I tell you the answer, can anyone think of an expression that we've learned before? And it's a te form expression that you can attach to the end of a verb that shows that verb happened over time. And to give you an example, one way you might hear it being used is saying it's gotten hot. And you want to emphasize that it just didn't get hot instantly, like someone switched the light on and all of a sudden, it's hot. That over the past few weeks or past few months or days or whatever, it has gotten hot. Can anyone think of that expression? If not, that's fine. I'll let you know, but I wanted to give you a chance to think of it. Yes, that's your teikuru. And kuru means to come. It's the going and coming. And so we often say if it's gotten let's see, there's the right one. If it's gotten hot, this is an extremely common phrase that you hear all the time. This natekita. Atsuku natekita. It didn't just get hot. The te kuru, as in it's come to become hot. As in this becoming didn't happen instantaneously. It happened over time. And so taking that and jamming that onto the end of this sentence, I don't believe we have any te kuru examples in this lesson, but it is so common that it's definitely worth mentioning. So you might hear something like this. Hito wa dokodemo smaho o motsu you ni natte kita. And you might think to yourself, well, why? Why are we putting two expressions that feel like they're kind of doing the same thing? They're both expressing kind of a change or a transition over time. And the answer to that, which is the answer to almost all questions in all languages, is emphasis. Like we always are working at different levels of emphasis and energy in our sentences. And why use one adjective that means something when you can use two adjectives that mean the same thing to give it that extra punch? And that's what we're doing here. So there's just one more example of this motsu. Again, we're not talking about the potential form. We're talking about just a change that happened. It's not that we didn't have hands to hold the phones. We just didn't have phones. And now we do. Let's take a look at the second one. As I said, the second one I feel is much more common. Now there are changes to where people aren't doing something and then are doing something, but as humans, we tend to get, generally, I'd say we tend to get better at life, and we learn new things, especially those of you that are younger. You know, you're probably still in school and you're learning things, you're learning skills, you're learning, picking up hobbies. And you know, the reason I mentioned hanasu before and hanaseru is, you know, you're learning Japanese. And if this hasn't happened already, I promise you, if you don't give up, you will reach the point that you can speak Japanese. And that's not going to be a light switch. You're not going to wake up one day and say, "Wow, it's amazing." It's going to take days, months, years, depending on your goal and your situation and 1,000 other things. And so you see this transition over time happening with ability very, very often. And so here I actually have changed my my settings right now on Renshu. I was testing something, are not showing the hiragana all the time, so apologies for that. But Renshu sureba oyogeru you ni naru yo. If you practice, and again Renshu, that's the name of the app. Renshu sureba, you will come to be able to swim, or you will become able to swim. You know, there's a number of different ways to say it. And so again, this one is one that you see quite often. And so as a quick little challenge, let's go back to that Japanese example. Whether you've been able to when I'm just reading what someone wrote. If let's talk about Japanese. If you can't speak it yet, or you can't write it yet, or that's your feeling, you can change the naru here into what? You can change it to naritai. So let's take a little bit of practice time. Practice is, as most of you know, it's not required. You're not going to get called out or anything. But think about something that you'd like to be able to do. Something that you'd like to be able to do. So for example, a bit longer, but as some of you know, I like rock climbing, bouldering specifically. And you know, I'm okay. I'm not great. I'm okay, but I'd like to get better. So, もっと上手にロッククライミングができるようになりたい. So I'm expressing a want for that change to take place. And it's not going to be a light switch. It's going to take time for that to happen. So I use this yo ni naru to show that. What about you? You being anyone else that's here in the Discord with me. What's something that you would like to come to be able to do in the future? And if you can't think of anything, use the easy choice. Use Japanese. I want to read. I want to be able to read kanji, or come to be able to read kanji. I want to come to the point that I can speak, or I can take the train in Japan, or whatever. I don't think you can see it in the video if you're watching this video afterwards, but there are a number of people typing. Oh, you can see. So let's see what they come up with. Okay, so we've got someone talking about playing the guitar, singing. Now, one person, this is an interesting thing, mentioning dri Duraibusuru is a really interesting verb because it makes us think of just driving, as in driving a car. It doesn't mean that. It means going on a drive, as in an activity, not the activity of like, pressing on the brake or the acceleration or the gas or whatever. It's the event. Hey, let's go for a drive today. It's that thing. And so here they've got two verbs in there, and going on a drive is probably something that's not a potential verb because there's not really a sense of do you have the ability to go on a drive, the event of going on a drive. Probably my guess is that you'd want to focus on the verb that's closer to driving, as in maybe I don't have a license. I haven't studied yet. I don't have a license. And so that would be untensuru. So if you were to extend that using the expression we have today, you'd probably go with unten dekiru you ni naritai. And then you're talking about the actual physical action of you being in the car, operating the car, making it go broom broom, and going forward. So a few more, and let me toss out a few more small corrections. I love these. I love these answers. So with anime, anime typically means visual. Anime is on a screen. So if you're talking about reading, you're probably talking about manga. Meter for anime, yomu for manga. And then again, we don't necessarily need two. Yeah, we don't really need two verbs here. So understanding reading, you wouldn't need to say that. You could just say yomeru you ni naritai. I want to come to be able to read. And inside of that being able to read, there's the implicit meaning of understanding what you're reading. I hope. So that's probably a cleaner way to write that sentence. And then, so let me focus on the other two. The two people put, I like these because the second sentence is, and I'm going to copy paste them real fast, or copy paste not the important parts, but the parts I want to focus on. Um, the first one is usually more common, and they're both right. They're both right. They're both perfectly natural. But I like the first one's talking about being able to speak Japanese, and they're focusing on the speak, hanasu. What I like about the second one as well is it uses kind of a rarer form, not rare as in like special, but just you don't hear it quite as much amongst learners, although it's quite natural. You can take the noun as a whole, nihongo, and then use the dekiru to be able to do Japanese. And that one's a bit broader. It's talking about, reading, writing, speaking. It might talk about all those, or it might be something specific they're just not mentioning. But it's similar to, oh, it's not on the screen, but you often see nouns that could take the place of activities. And you can use that form as well. If you were talking about cooking, you could also swap out Nihongo for ryori. Ryori ga dekiru you ni naritai. So I want to come to be able to cook. And there's no verb in there, but ryori is referring to an action or an activity. So Excellent examples for both of those and for everyone else. So let's keep going. We still have a lot to do. So we just talked about let me back up for a sec. So these are talking about um, personal stuff. I came to have an interest in cooking, or the person is speaking to the listener and saying, you'll come to be able to swim. And these are kind of both personal changes. But you can also talk about, and we already talked about this with smartphones earlier, you can talk about much broader sentences or examples. And so, real fast, we're going to fly through these. First one, 最近アメリカ人がもっとアニメなどを見るようになってきた. Oh, there's our なってくる. So lately, and this sentence is slightly dated, although I think it's still happening. Americans have come to watch more things like anime. And you might say that fits better, say 5 years ago, but it also works now. And the second one, 周りの季節が来ると街中に太鼓の音を聞くようになる. So when they refer to the matsuri kisetsu, the season of matsuri, they are talking about summer typically. Summer, sometimes spring, but that's when most of the festival seasons come or take place. And yeah, during those matsuri, even if it's far away, you can still hear those taiko drums. Oh, you know what? I actually am seeing. I apologize for this. It's one sec. This is this. Oh, I see what's going on. My apologies. One second. There's a small mistake in this panel, and I can see that I'm actually not on the right version of Renshu. You've probably noticed that down here it's talking about yukata, and that's also why I've got the strange kanji settings. So please give me one sec. Whoops. Of course I can't type out the name of my own site. But that's why it looked different. I apologize for that. It doesn't really change the lesson, but there was a small mistake that I'd fixed in the version that you all see. The main Renshu server. There we go. So all our kanji are back, and we can see that you come to hear the sound of taiko drums. And those taiko drums really echo throughout the town so that you can hear them everywhere. So we've used yoni naru to talk about changes that the subject is not in charge of. Things are happening naturally or things that are happening because someone else did them, to show that change transitioning over time. Now, let's flip over, before we go to suru, let's flip over to the opposite. And this is, unfortunately, one of those ones where if you look at it in its components, you're like, this makes perfect sense. It's just the opposite of it. But now when you try and say it, this is where your tongue ties itself into a knot and then leaps out of your mouth and just says, nope, I'm done. I'm done with Japanese. This is I'm not doing this. So, but it's just the negative form. Now, what's really interesting here, and before we talk about the sentences, I just want to look at these last two words I've highlighted in blue. And so most of you probably know this, but just in case you don't, and it's a good refresher, here's the negative form of noboru. Noboranai. So what is happening here when we change it to noboranaku? What form is that? Like what's going on? Any ideas? And if you don't know the technical term, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure on that either, tell me what it feels like. What does it feel like doing? What does that remind you of when you see that? Something should be firing off in your head saying, man, it kind of looks like that. And I'm the kind of person that doesn't get into the nitty gritty of grammar. I can't recite all the grammatical terms and inflections and all this stuff, but I know I can see what's going on. It's not the kute form. What the first person mentioned is the way that I've always internalized it, and it makes the most sense to me. Is that nai you can treat as an adjective. Kind of an adjective is being lumped onto the back end of the verb. And it's not just an adjective, it's an e adjective. And so it conjugates the way that an e adjective does. And if you think of it that way, a lot of verb conjugations start making sense when you think about the negative forms. If you say, I didn't climb, that kind of looks like kawaiku nakata, not cute. It wasn't cute. Hey, those ends are the same. And so you have the nai form doing the same thing. Anyway, so we're taking the adjectival form, the nai, and we're switching over to the adverbial form. An adverb is when you take something that modifies a verb and we're modifying the naru. We're adding something to the naru. So noboranaku naru means to come to no longer climb. Now note that here the yo is gone. The yo is not present anymore. And let me go ahead and highlight the full sentences. So if we say, noboranai, then we're just saying not climbing. It doesn't say anything about whether you're climbing before, how much you were climbing. Noboranai just means you don't climb now. Now, if you climbed yesterday, now if you're talking about just specific events and you said yesterday I climbed a tree. So, for example, yesterday nobotta, but today you're not going to. 昨日は登ったが今日は登らない. Now, is this showing a change? Not really. It's just showing two events. In one event, you happen to be climbing, the other event, you aren't. But you're not really showing a change or a transition. This nakunaru form, though, is showing a transition. A change is taking place. And because of that, it's often focused around a long period of time, or sometimes a much smaller, focus, or focused on a much smaller point in time. So in the first one, you see, 子供は大人になってから木を登らなくなる. So as children become adults, they stop climbing trees. And there's no law that says once you become an adult, stop climbing those trees. So there's not an instantaneous change. It's just typically, kids that climbed trees, stop climbing when they're an adult. Their bodies get heavier. It becomes harder to climb trees. Maybe they're not as physically fit. Insert 1,000 different reasons. But you see that change. It's not today I'm climbing, but tomorrow, I'm so sorry, I really want to climb, but I'm turning 18. I can't do it. You're climbing less and less and less and less. And one day you realize, oh, I don't climb trees anymore. It's that kind of change. The second one is a bit more immediate. But おじさんが事故にあって歩けなくなった. It does not have the yoni. Yoni is only for the positive form. The negative form does not have it. It's just the verb in the ku form, that adjectival ku form, or adjectival adverbial ku form, and naru. So there's no yoni in there. Now this one, the change is quite instant. Your uncle was in an accident and they're no longer able to walk. But this nakunaru is showing the transition between up until the point of the accident they could walk, and now they no longer can. And by the way, that crazy kanji below the a in the middle of that sentence, I believe this is a higher level kanji than what we're studying at, which is N4. But just let's step aside from the grammar for a sec and take a look at that word. Does anyone know how that differs from the ao that we all know and love? So there's the owl that we learned pretty early on. And this one has the same meaning, but there's a different nuance to it. They both mean to meet or to come into contact with someone or something. But the owl in the sentence, what's the nuance attached to that one? Can you use the context of the sentence to give you a hint as to what that might mean? Why is it different? Same meaning, more or less, different nuance. Collide is not this. Collide, you're close. You're going in the right direction. You were right with a negative nuance, and the second person nailed it. It is an unfortunate, like it's a meeting that has a negative nuance. This isn't a nuance. This is very negative. If your uncle was in an accident, but it has a negative. We say in English they met with an accident. We don't say it that often, but we talk about how this is an unfortunate meeting. So yes, that's what to have an accident, to meet with an accident. Now this one is what I'm highlighting over. It's combined it, so it's a compound verb, so it's got chico in there, but you can see how that ao is being used slightly differently. Anyway, let's keep going. We're running out of time. Now we've talked about naru. All this naru is, as you've noticed, it's out of control of the subject, and let me put a bit of a qualifier there. This first one, you might say, well, the person, whoever this child is that's becoming an adult, or children, they still made an active decision at some point to climb or not climb. So they're still choosing it, so to speak. And yes, but at the same time, here it's more of a natural, it's a natural change that within that natural change, there are active decisions being made over the weeks and months and years. But the decision to stop climbing trees is probably not, in this sentence, it was probably not an active choice to stop. It was just a collection of things that happened that resulted in them no longer climbing trees. Now that we've talked about all the different ways that things can happen to you, good and bad, let's talk about the things that you can do yourself. And just to respond to what someone typed in the chat, that is, you're right, but that's a different verb actually. It's this one. And mnemonic there for the kanji, you can probably, that kind of looks like something that you might be put in after you pass away, or at least half of it. I'm talking about a coffin and not a pot, and now it looks like half of a pot to me. Hopefully you're not cooked after you pass away. But yes, but nakunata, that's a really good thing to mention. This is a cultural note, just like if we have euphemisms in English, they have 100 times as many in Japanese. There's so many ways to go around and not say the thing that you're trying to say. And nakunaru is usually how you refer to someone passing, instead of saying they died. In the same way that we usually don't say, adults usually don't say, they passed away, they're in a better place. And it's the same in Japanese. Okay, let's talk about suru now and wrap up today's lesson. So suru is used to show effort. And how can you show effort? You show effort if you, the subject, is making the decision to do some kind of action. And this one also has, it's not quite as strong, I feel, but it has that hint of change in it as well. That some kind of change, some kind of transition is taking place. And you can use it with positive and negative verbs. The naru, remember, we could only use the yoni naru with positive, and negative took that nakunaru form. With this one, yoni suru, we can use positive and negative. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into some examples. So let's look at this first one. And let's think about what is actually going on here. 天気が良ければ 仕事に歩くようにします。So, if the weather is good, I make an effort to walk. Now, why do you have to make an effort to walk? What's the underlying meaning there? You don't do it already, or you don't do it enough. There's your change. There's your transition. If it was already happening, it was a rhythm that you had, if it was a habit, you wouldn't need to say this. But you're making an effort because you're trying to actively affect a change here. And that change is walking to work. So when the weather's good, I will make an effort to walk. And of course, before this, whether it's, and we have two examples here, the ku, aruku, and then we have the negative form down below, nebo, or nebo, sorry. Uh, you have the positive and the negative, but you'll never use past tense because it doesn't really make sense to say, I'll make an effort to do something that's already finished. That's impossible. But so we're going to have these base forms, either the base positive form or the base negative form. So let's keep going. We have a bunch of examples, like 6 or 7, and then we'll be done. And again, this is just repeating what I said. You're making an effort. It's not something you've gotten all the way done. And sometimes you can't do it, but you're trying to make that change. Now this one is kind of a combination of two different things going on. Now we've got, so let me read the first half. 明日の飛行機が早いから寝坊しないようにしてください. Now you have possibly heard this ないように as a separate grammar element, and there's a bit of overlap going on here. But let's focus on what's going on here. We have a negative verb plus ようにする. So again, it's the same meaning. You're making an effort this time not to do something, but to not do something. And so if you're not doing something, it's typically, it's something that has a negative meaning attached to it, like oversleeping or sleeping in. So, 寝坊しないようにしてください. Please make an effort. Now, you don't see make an effort in there, but the meaning is embedded in the sentence. And here, the take kudasai just means what? It's not you saying it to yourself, it's someone saying it to you. Perhaps your boss, your parents, older sibling, whoever. You've got a plane flight tomorrow, an early plane flight tomorrow. So please try, or please make an effort to not oversleep. And, these are all actions that the subject is taking or not taking, but they're choosing not to take them or to take them. Let's look at a few more examples and we'll wrap things up. Now, this one, note that yomu, the action we're talking about, is, like I said, keep it in the present tense or the non-past, but we can change the back end. The back end can be in the past tense. Like if this was an effort that you made previously, you can use した or しました. So 昨日30分間本を読むようにした. And you could also just say 30分 here. 昨日30, I'm going to read it that way because it sounds a smidge more natural in my head. 昨日30分本を読むようにした. So yesterday I made an effort to read the book for 30 minutes. Now, this sentence doesn't say exactly how that went. Did they read it for 30 minutes? We're not sure. Maybe they did, but the person wants to focus on the effort that they made. Maybe they're telling the teacher, yeah, I only read 15 minutes, but I tried to read for 30 minutes, but I had a flight tomorrow, so I couldn't, oversleep. I don't know. But you're focusing on the effort that's taking place. And let's do one more. 人の名前を覚えるのは大切だから This is something I should listen to more often. Let me start again. 人の名前を覚えるのは大切だから忘れないようにしている. So, this one, it's important to remember people's names. So, I try to not forget. And with this one, we see a very small change. And with that, we have, instead of suru, we have shiteiru, which just shows a more, it shows that this effort is continual. So the sentence above, if you compare it to that, we have someone, they tried to read for 30 minutes yesterday, and that's it. Or if we go back one page, if you recall, we were talking about the plane being early tomorrow, so please make sure to not oversleep. And so there's kind of a spot. It's a spot decision. Whereas this one, there's more of an emphasis on it continually happening. So I try not to forget their names, and I'm going to keep trying to do that, and just keep trying. It's more of an active process that the subject is going through. And that's it. That's all we've got today. So, real fast to summarize. Again, if you were with us last week, you've probably seen all the parallels drawn across these two. If we are dealing with, and I'm going to type it out for you. If it's positive yo ni naru or the negative nakunaru, we are talking about actions not controlled by the subject or natural changes. And we're focusing on, transitions, changes over time. However, the ones we just did, yoni suru, remember suru is our verb that we've got control of. It's ours, it's our verb. Yoni suru is for, positive and negative. And it's controlled by the subject, which is often you. Controlled by the subject. And the reason you're using this is to show that it's something, a change, it's happening now. It's taking place now, but you're not all the way there. Otherwise, you wouldn't say it. Like if you could remember everyone's names perfectly, you wouldn't need to do this. But if you know, to give you a bit more context with this last sentence, if you know that you forget people's names, and so you are making a point to not forget them, maybe the next sentence would say, I write down their names in my, or I type their names into my phone and take a quick picture of them when they're not looking to help me remember, or something like that. So there's some kind of effort being made, not just I'll do my best, but there's some kind of concrete thing going on here. It's just not mentioned in the sentence. Anyway, that is it. We actually came in just a few minutes under our usual time. So if anyone has any questions, we usually don't have question time, but any questions about this topic that we went over today, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we will wrap it up. While people are thinking about potential questions, again, let me note that you can find this in the Discord, these once the video is uploaded, and as well as, just in case you didn't know this existed, because Renshu is vast. I had someone that they have been using Renshu for, I want to say, about 17 years. Their user ID is in the 4 digits. They're very old user. And I was talking to them yesterday, and they just found something that's rather large in Renshu that they hadn't noticed in their 15, 16 years of using it. That's how much is in there. So it's always possible to find new stuff. These videos are always available under the menu. If you go to resources and then Japanese lessons, any video that has a little video icon next to it, which this one will have soon, you can tap on that to watch these videos as much as you want. We use Vimeo and not YouTube, so there's none of those ads in between, or hey, why not watch this at the end? It's just the video and nothing else. So it's there if you need it. Anyway, I don't see any questions coming up, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you for joining us.